Can you please tell us about yourself?
My name is Kim Jameson, and I started a program called STARS, Students Tackling Autism Related Syndromes, 10 years ago at the Christian Brothers University campus in Memphis, Tennessee.
Which students are typically a good fit for your program?
The students that we are generally looking for in terms of a good fit for our program are, of course, students that have the academic skills. They have a strong GPA from high school and also have done well on their ACT, SAT. But beyond that, we're also looking for students that are able to persist when challenges occur. They've got some grit. They're able to bounce back when they face challenges. And I think most importantly, they're able to take constructive feedback. Because we've had some students that aren't able to take constructive feedback. And if you're not able to, realize, okay, I've got a challenge here, it's hard to coach a student through their college years. So I would say having that grit and determination and follow through are important characteristics for the students that we're looking for our program. And the students that generally thrive in our program are also students with those same characteristics that are able to, face the fact that they're also accepting of their autism diagnosis. We've had some students that do not accept it and really don't really want the help. They just are there because their parents want them to have the help. So that we have to have the buy-in from that student to say, hey, I recognize I have autism. I recognize there are challenges with that. And I know I need some support while I go through school. So I think those would be the most important characteristics of students that thrive in our program.
Are there any common pitfalls that tend to trip up some students?
So for students that, sometimes hit pitfalls, which is going to happen in school and in life, of course, I would say some of the greatest pitfalls we have for some of our students is when they enter college, and a lot of them enter college thinking they're going to be an engineering major. We've had a lot of those students that, that are maybe have had pretty decent math skills in high school, but then they take the college level math and they can't keep up. I don't think students are really aware of the challenge that college represents as far as the amount of work and the time it takes to get the homework done and prepared for exams and all of that. So I would say math is a big pitfall for a lot of the students. And also, when it comes to more like English papers, papers, which is a lot of classes require written papers, some of our students really struggle with perfectionism. They know that the paper's not exactly the way they want it to say. They keep editing it, and next thing you know, the paper's due and they didn't turn it in because they weren't happy enough with it. And as I tell the students I work with, it's better to get a B and maybe not that A you think you deserve because the paper wasn't quite right, than failing it altogether because you did not submit the paper. So I would say the perfectionism has got to be realized, and to realize that it's okay if it's not perfect, because what is perfect in life anyway? I mean, and I think that's one of the greatest struggles is they have the mindset of, oh, I got to do this. It's got to be exactly what I have in mind. But sometimes there's so many other classes you have to deal with too, and you're juggling so many classes that it's important to realize it's better to turn in paper than get a zero. Also, another area where we see a lot of struggles are with all the different portals that students have to deal with for each class. Now, some classes, the professor will say, just hand me the paper directly. Some will say, okay, these assignments have to be done through a certain portal, or they'll say, do not submit the paper to me directly. Do not email it to me, but submit it through Canvas. So each class has different methods of how to submit papers and also do their homework. And there have been times where I've had students transfer to me that they've already been in school for about a year and they're not doing well. And some of those students just were unaware of the different portals that they had to go to for perhaps their math class or their physics lab class or something. So it's important to be familiar with all the different portals and make sure that they're turning their homework and assignments in the right way. Because oftentimes they will, even like their final exam sometimes has to be submitted a certain way. And just recently, one of my students didn't submit it the right way and got a 0. So I would say that's a big pitfall for some of our students. Another with that involves really just their lifestyle. We see a lot of students that are addicted to video gaming. They spend way too many hours playing video games, and that disrupts their sleep. And I would say also then that turns right into another important part of is getting the proper amount of sleep. Going to bed and waking up at the same time is really important. Although in college, there's a lot of distractions out there, and maybe they have a roommate that keeps them up late. We fortunately have not had any problems with roommates, at least, not problems that have caused major issues for the students. We've been pretty lucky in that way. But of course, executive functioning and time management is already such a struggle for our students. And then if you have any comorbidities with the autism, like ADHD, which is very common, that also creates more struggles with time management. So that's why it's even more important for students to really have a strict sleep schedule and stick to that so they don't miss classes. Because a lot of times if they don't have a good sleep schedule, they're going to end up oversleeping because they stayed up too late. And we do have a lot of problems with students who oversleep and miss class. And of course, if you miss class, it's just a good way of not performing well in that class. Because if you miss a class, you miss a lot of information.
Now let's please discuss how you work with the parents of students in your program.
With STARS, I think our program may be different than other programs where we welcome the parents' participation. As a matter of fact, for our first interview that we set up with the student, we actually prefer to have the parents with them if possible. And we've learned over the years, we used to have an application where we met with them briefly, told them about the program, sent them away with the application, and then we waited for them to return it. Over the years, I've learned of a better method where we actually have the application and we go through the application right then and there at our first meeting. And that application is very thorough. It provides us a lot of information about how well they did in high school and what their expectations are in college. It's also very clearly listed what the responsibilities and expectations are for the students that enter the team program. And with that, one of the things that we do, because we also let them know that they expect things from us as well. And what we do is every midterm, we do a midterm report. And it's a very thorough report that gives you a snapshot of how the student is doing at this point in time, halfway through the semester. We've had great success with this method because many times if you catch the student early enough, if they're not doing well, we can turn around that grade. They may end up getting a D on their midterm report and they end up getting an A or B in the class because we are very proactive about turning any issues around and addressing them and hopefully helping solve whatever issues they're having in class at that time. So we get the students permission to do this during the application process. And there have only been a couple of students who have not given us permission only because their parents were not involved at all with their higher education. But almost all of our students, though, the parents are very involved. And we are happy to hear from them. I believe that this is one of the reasons we call it a team program, is that back in high school and the other years in school, the IEP, which I feel was a huge part of my son's success, the individual education plan that he had from first grade all the way through 12th grade, which also involved the parents. They were part of the team. I felt that was an integral part of his success in college. But then you get to college and there is no IEP team. So that's a big reason why I named it the team program, is to really showcase the fact that it takes a team. It takes a team effort to get through these college years. College is much more difficult than high school. And we have seen that so many students do great in high school without even having to study. And then they come to college and they're starting to get some poor grades because a lot of students didn't even learn how to study when they were in high school, which is very sad to hear, but some students really were bright enough to kind of get through without having to do much studying, where in college that changes. And we always make sure that our parents and our students know that when we first meet with them, that college is has a much different pace than they had in high school and earlier years. You're not going to get the professor saying, "Don't forget, we got a math exam tomorrow." The students are expected to read the syllabus and understand the syllabus, and that's also something we do with our students when we first meet with them for our first meeting before school begins, is to review every syllabus in each class so they understand what the rules are with that particular professor, because each class is different and each professor has different rules.
Do you have any advice for parents of neurodivergent college students?
The first thing I want to do is share probably the best advice I've ever received in my whole life, and that's from my son, he was a freshman at school at the time. And, I got to say, I'm really proud of him for letting his mother be there on campus with him. And because he was really my first student that I coached and helped through all the different programming throughout the years. And the advice he gave to me is, "Mom, when you get upset, it doesn't help the situation ever. So how about you just don't get upset and just communicate clearly so I know what it is you're talking about." And now he wasn't referring to me at school, he was referring to me at home. And I see this with parents, like, you don't know what's going on. I mean, all of this is new. They think differently than you. Things come up that you've never experienced before, and it can get really frustrating. And as a parent, I've seen a lot of parents get frustrated. But the students feel that too. And like Joseph, my son, said, it doesn't help. So being calm and taking things one step at a time, because they will get through this. So my best advice for parents in that situation is to stay calm, keep notes, reach out to your program director if you're seeing any problems. One thing that I think is really important that a lot of students seem to have a challenge with is doing homework on the weekends. A lot of the students I work with, they think, "Oh, well, school's not open on Saturday, Sunday. I don't have to do any homework." So if your student comes home for the weekend, a lot of our students, they live in the dorm, but they want to go home on the weekends. And so if that's your case and your student comes home for the weekend, keep an eye and see if they are doing homework on the weekend, making sure, kind of checking on their progress. I'm always thrilled when parents are checking on their students' progress, because it does take a team to help them through these college years. So, and also, some of the students are going to fail classes. They're going to have, we've had students that have the wrong major. And like I said before, a lot of our students enter college thinking they're going to be an engineer. And then they take that first calculus class and they can't make it. They can't see it through. So know that there's going to be some struggles. That really is to be expected. And to be alarmed if you see a change in their personality, if you see depression or anything that is causing a lot of anxiety, make sure that gets addressed. And if they do need help with counseling, professional counseling, help them with that as well. So I would definitely say, just keep an eye on how they're performing and how they're feeling on the weekends when you see them. And there's probably going to be a time where they may fail a class or do very poorly in a class. And that's the time to say, well, is this the right major for you? But so you have to let go a little bit. And you've got to let them, if they're going to make a mistake, you have to let it happen sometimes. Sometimes people don't learn until they hit rock bottom. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So you just really need to understand that your student is going to have some challenges, and that picking the right major for their strengths is such a critical part of their success.
You are also the parent of a neurodivergent college graduate. What did you learn from that?
So if I could give you any words of wisdom as a parent, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that were a surprise to me, and I'm sure a surprise to all parents. My son did very well living in the dorm at college for those 4 years. However, after he graduated, I thought he would go, get an apartment with a buddy of his and all would be wonderful. Well, that hasn't happened yet. And he's graduated now. It's been almost 5 years. So just know that their maturity level they may not be ready to be completely on their own. They may not be comfortable leaving the house quite yet. So I do want to warn you that even though they've graduated from college and they did well in their dorm, they may not be quite ready for independent living. Although my son, he drives and he goes to work every day. He does his own laundry and he's had a job since he was 15 years old, which also I want to encourage you to make sure your child does have a job earlier in life, because I work with a lot of students that have had no employment, and that makes it even harder for them to get a job after they graduate. Which then leads me to employment after they graduate. 85% of autistic college graduates are unemployed or underemployed. So those numbers are real numbers. That percentage is a real number. And when I first learned about the 85% unemployment or underemployment with college grads, I didn't believe it because they're so bright. I met with them week after week and they're doing fantastic in school. Yes, they have to work harder than everyone else, but they're making it. And it wasn't until I started walking the walk with my son and other students and seeing what they went through just to get an internship, the mental anguish that they have to get an internship. And, keep in mind, change is one of the hardest things for people with autism. And when they're going through school, they've been going through school before college for about 12 years. They know how to do school. They can do college. They can get through college, but they've never had to go get competitive employment before. It's hard for neurotypical people to obtain competitive employment after they graduate. For people that think differently, it's much more difficult. So please do everything you can to help them prepare for after they graduate. By helping them with my son, I actually had to go with him when he was 15 years old to Outback Steakhouse to apply for a job as a busser. I went with him to let the manager know that he has autism. And I think that was one of the main reasons he got the job, because if he didn't tell him he had autism, the interviewer may have been like, I don't know about this guy. He's not really, looking at me in the eye. He's not really answering all my questions. So the more that they can start practicing employment and practicing independence, the earlier they can do that, the better. The better shot they'll have at maintaining employment after they graduate.
Big thanks to Kim Jameson and the STARS program. Please subscribe to Inclusive Academia.